I will be leading the meeting tonight. We meet here Monday nights from 7 to 8. All are welcome who desire freedom from your life-dominating sin and addiction. If you or anyone you know needs help or recovery support, email recovery@ghproject.org. It's more for anyone that might see this online. The number is 610-874-2753. Greenhouse Project, we live life in the struggle with neighbors because every life is meant to flourish. We cultivate gospel-centered long-term relationships and community support for those who are struggling in Chester, PA. Our ministry provides safe environments for life transformation through free recovery counseling, life coaching, food outreach, youth mentorship, and church fellowship. You can also sign up for the weekly newsletter online. We're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. This meeting is recorded, but only the message portion to help more people. We will either remember to pause and stop the recording, or that will end up being cut anyway. But recording is only for the message, because they play all messages on the website, on YouTube, which is a great resource. I don't know about anybody else, but I know I got to constantly be renewing my mind, and I love podcasts. So if you want to check out old messages, there's been all kinds of speakers here. Check out the YouTube channel. The Sunday sermons are also on YouTube. We're a donor-supported ministry. You can support financially by using the donation box or going online. And I'm going to go ahead and open us up in a word of prayer. Dear Lord, I just thank you for the Greenhouse Project, and I just thank you that there is a place that we can come, Lord, to draw closer to you. I just pray for this night. I pray a hedge of protection around this night. I just ask that it would be guided by your Spirit, Lord. I pray that you would prepare all of our hearts for a word from you, Lord. And I just pray this in Jesus' precious name. And I will go ahead and read the full Serenity Prayer, which is on page 1672 in the Recovery Bible. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will. We're going to be talking about surrender tonight, a little bit anyway. That I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. Like to ask everyone to make sure all your devices are turned off. What we share in the meeting stays in the meeting. You can always share this meeting link with anyone who wants to be set free from their life-dominating sin. So this is an open meeting. You can invite anyone who wants to come out. You can also share the link to anyone that might want to watch other sessions or whatever. There's a lot on there. Let's see. We want to encourage you to share. This is a safe place. Okay, so that's going to go. The speaker is going to be me tonight. So now before I get started, I just want to see how many Eagle fans are in the room. How many people think the Eagles are going to make it tonight, are going to win? Is there anyone who thinks they're not going to win? I don't know. I'm obviously an Eagles fan. I have had been very upset and heartbroken the last 6 weeks. So I went into this week, I'm like, there's no way we're going to win. And then all of a sudden today, I'm like, I have hope again. And I don't know if I'm setting myself up for heartbreak again or what, but we'll find out. It's fun. Well, anyway, so I wanted to share a little bit of my testimony because there are some new faces here. And I know that people that have been here might be tired of hearing my testimony, so I'm not going to share my whole testimony. Although I was thinking about that, I think I can get a little self-conscious myself because my sobriety date is June 28th, 2004. So I'm 19 years, I'm coming up on 20 years, and in my almost 20 years of recovery, I've heard a lot of people's messages over and over. I hear them a lot. And I personally don't get tired of them. I enjoy them. And I remember, because time goes by and then I kind of forget their story. So it's nice to hear it again. So, but anyway, I did want to just give a little bit of background on me. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about surrender. And then also our personal relationship with God that I think is foundational. But just to give you a little background, I had faith in God as a child. Not because I was raised in a Christian home, but I had a school bus pick us up that would bring the kids to church whose parents didn't go to church, and the parents were all happy to get rid of their kids on a Sunday morning. And I came to faith in Jesus at a young age. And I remember getting baptized, and I remember loving Jesus. And he actually got me through my very rough childhood. It was rough. I won't get into it. But I ended up being taken from my mom's custody at age 12, placed into the foster care system. And then in my most strict foster home is where I started drinking and smoking weed. And it actually started with smoking weed and then a little bit of drinking. But I was never going to do anything else. I swore I was never going to do anything else. It's just smoking weed and just drinking. And it was progressive, and it led, the things that I didn't do is much smaller than the list of things I didn't do. So, and I drank. Oh, and then it's also important to mention that I became an atheist at age 16, shortly after I picked up a drink. I thought I heard someone talking, or a radio or something. Is everything okay?
Yeah, pretty hard.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I was just talking to Jake. Anyway, I'd like to say Satan planted his, and I didn't know this at the time. This is hindsight, almost 20 years of being in church and being in the recovery community. But I like to say Satan planted a seed in 10th grade biology class. Now, I told you I went to church, and there were a few other people that had sowed seeds into me. And when I was learning about the evolution theory, how we evolved from ape and everything like that, I remember thinking, well, where is Adam and Eve in this equation? But I didn't have anyone to ask. It was just a thought that I had. I didn't have anyone to ask. And fast forward 6 months later, I was partying with my friend and her boyfriend was a science person. And he told me he didn't believe in God. I'm like, oh, you don't believe in God? Oh my gosh. And I was shocked. And then he started to go into how he believed in science. And I went back to what I learned in science class, and I trusted what I had learned in the public school system and what I had learned in 10th grade biology class. And I'm like, you know what? That made more sense to me at that time, and I became an atheist. And I stayed an atheist until I entered recovery almost 10 years later. But anyway, my drinking, I drank, I drugged, and I thought it was just a phase, and it just kept getting worse as I got older. And then I remember at one point I was like, I'm getting worse as I get older. I was like, I thought you were supposed to get better as you got older. So I started to realize that, I probably had a problem. And I was just thinking about this the other day. A lot of people, or I knew quite a few people that committed suicide. And this one gentleman that I actually worked with, I was a part-time bartender, and I did have a 9 to 5 that I managed. I always quit my job before I got fired, so I kind of moved around, and I always worked hard to support myself, because I didn't have, I learned at 18 years old that if I didn't pay my rent, I was going to end up on the street, and I was homeless at the age of 18, and technically I was living on a couch of the drug house that I hung out at, so that to me is homeless. And I realized at that age I was hanging out with people that were old enough to be my father, that I really needed to do something. And I worked hard to get my apartment, and I was able to keep an apartment. Got evicted a few times and moved around a lot, but I managed to somehow or another keep a roof over my head, because if I didn't, I was going to be homeless. But anyway, going back to this job, I worked with them. We were bartenders, and this one of my coworkers killed himself. He shot himself, and I went to his funeral. It was at St. Rose of Lima, which has a lot of AA meetings in it now, and I've spent a lot of time at that place. And I remember everyone at the bar was blaming his girlfriend. Everyone blamed, it was his girlfriend's fault, and everyone got mad at his girlfriend. And I'll never forget when I walked into the funeral, into St. Rose of Lima, I was just like, it's the alcohol. And I knew it, because he did what I felt like doing. And I knew it was the alcohol. And I just think about that, because at that time I didn't know what to do with it. I had never been in recovery at this point yet, but the longer you stay in recovery and the longer you track with God, he'll keep revealing things to you. And things just become clearer and clearer. And sometimes like at 10 years sober, something became clear, and these memories just pop up. And I just remember, like, no, I knew it was alcohol. And I knew that, and I battled suicide thoughts myself. Just this insanity. I had this rough childhood, and then I was trying to numb all those bad feelings. I didn't know how to cope with them. And so my answer was drinking and drugging. Well, fast forward to when it didn't numb me anymore. And that's why I decided to get help. So I was an atheist from that point on. And I would never really talk about God, only because I knew I had faith at one time. And I remember every now and then the topic of God would come up. Not that often when I was out partying, but every so often it would. And I remember one time just having this conversation with this guy who believed in God. And I'm like, well, I don't want to talk you out of believing in God, because someone talked me out of it. And he was like, you can't talk me out of believing in God. But I always tried to stay away, because I knew how easily I was talked out of it, and I didn't want to be that person to somebody else. So I always tried to stay away from conversations from God, and that was my motivation, is I didn't want to be the person that someone lost faith in God. But anyway, so to get to my last drunk, at the end of my drinking, I was getting what I wanted and just going back to my apartment, and I was 2 months behind on my rent. I was a couple months behind on my car payment. I was about to lose my job. As a matter of fact, my job was slowly disappearing at work, and I realized it, and everything was closing in on me. And I realized that if I didn't change, I was going to lose everything I worked so hard for. And God gave me this vision. I'll never forget it. It was like, I don't know if it was like 6 a.m. I was up all night. I didn't have enough alcohol to go to sleep, and I was just at my wit's end and didn't know what to do. I ran out of substances, and I was waiting for my sister to wake up. But I remember being in the kitchen and just looking down. I'll never forget. And then I just realized, if you don't do something, you're going to lose everything. And God just gave me that vision. And to fast forward, just because I don't have time to go through all the details, I went to my sister's house when she woke up at like 10 o'clock, and we called the intergroup office of AA. We were in the yellow pages. This was almost 20 years ago. And we didn't have the Google. I mean, I don't know what we had, but it wasn't that easy. And I went to my first AA meeting. And so I got sober through AA. I got a sponsor. I got a home group. The God thing, God knew what he was doing, because as soon as I started to hear talk about God, I kind of was like, oh, I don't believe in God, so this isn't going to work for me. But people told me to just keep coming back. And what happened is, all of a sudden, I got a sponsor, and I started walking through the 12 steps, and God became the most important part of my life. And I started seeking out God in many different ways. I was going to Catholic church. I was going to Buddhist places. Anything that talked about God, I was going to. And finally, someone led me to the Bible. I won't go through all the details, but each part of my testimony has like a long story with it. And it's just a beautiful thing how God had set it all up. But someone led me to the Bible. I started reading the Gospel of John. And one night when I was reading the Gospel of John, in my living room, I got on my knees and asked Jesus into my heart. And just started going to church. And then I started going to Calvary Chapel. And I loved Calvary Chapel because they had a recovery meeting. And I could do Christ and my AA. And I really struggled because I came from the AA background. And I didn't get a warm welcoming when I talked about AA initially, and I kind of struggled, so I felt like as a new Christian, I had to do my AA and my church were two separate things, and I couldn't talk about church. No one in AA wanted to hear about it. I started running around AA. I'm like, I received Jesus into my heart, and no one cared. They told me that like people called me Jesus freak. They called me this. And then when I went to church, I couldn't really talk about my AA. So when I found Calvary Chapel, I could kind of bring the two together, and it just really, I actually had to seek out. I was in such a place of, how do I say this? I had to like find a Christian counselor that I paid for, and my budget was very tight at that time, just because I was in such this divide, because people at church didn't really think, I didn't hear good things about the AA, and I'm like, I got sober through AA. How could it be that bad? And I came to know God through, and my counselor just explained to me that it is okay. God uses AA, and but I don't know. When I found Calvary Chapel, it put everything together for me. And I've been doing both. And I still go to AA meetings today. I go to be a light because I went into AA and I did not know God. And I truly believe that God made that program for people like me. Because there's just some people that don't want anything to do with God. Like, God was the last thing I thought I was going to get. I didn't know He is what I needed, but He loved us so much that He created a program to reach us. And then now that I am a Christian and I've been walking with the Lord I've been walking with the Lord since I was 2 years sober. So now I got the scriptures too. And when I came to know Christ, that's when that void was completely filled. When I came to know Him, because I still felt like, even though I was sober, I still felt like something was kind of missing. But when I came that night, when I got on my knees and asked Christ into my heart, it was just, I've never been the same. And God became the most important part of my life, and He still is today, and He has been. And I truly believe that fact of my life is why I've been able to stay sober this time, the amount of time I had. Now, I've been around for almost 20 years and in recovery, and I've sponsored a lot of women. And I've seen two things that I think where people stumble. First of all, I've met a lot of people that eventually come into faith. I mean, the big book tells us that we have a spiritual malady, and that our answer is spiritual. I'm trying to find the exact. I had a couple of quotes from the big book that I wanted to share. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Well, I know where it is right here. So my favorite chapter in the big book is We Agnostics. And it just goes in, like, and if you do struggle, I've been here for a while, and it seems like just about everyone here that I've heard share, they have faith in God. So that is great. But if you do struggle with your faith, I don't know, I think We Agnostics is a great chapter to read. But it says, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life, or else. Lack of power, and this is on the page 44 and 45 of the big book. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? So the big book goes on to say that that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. And it goes on to say that it means, of course, we are going to talk about God. Now, I will tell you, after being in church for a while, I learned that the big book comes right out of the Bible. Everything in the big book is scriptural based. And John kind of went on how that started with the Oxford group, talking last week about the Oxford group and our roots. So I can tell you our higher power is Jesus Christ. And getting back to the two areas that I see people struggle with. First is fully surrendering. And I've seen people that come to faith, and anyone that I have sponsored, most people have come to some sort of faith in God. There's one person that I can think of who unfortunately couldn't get the faith aspect of it, and she's not, that I'm aware of, sober today. But I've walked with a lot of people that have faith in God, and but they couldn't surrender, fully surrender. There's something that they want to hold on to that they don't want to give to God. I'm just here to tell you, though, that if you can get to that place of fully surrendered, that's where the peace comes. I mean, we have a whole list of steps that we follow, and you'll take a deep dive into steps 2 and 3. But that's surrendering, and it can be a process. It can be a process, and I know for me, it was a process. Like for me, it took me almost 2 years to fully go through the steps, because I really struggled with steps 2 and 3. And my sponsor would not move on until I had faith in God, and until I was on my knees and I was praying every morning, and I was also doing a devotion in the morning. And I'm thankful that she incorporated those disciplines in me, because it's those disciplines today that helped my faith grow, and I still incorporate them today. I still start my day with God in quiet time, and it's foundational for me. But that surrender it's not a one and done. It's a lifelong process, because initially we surrender the drink problem. But really we're powerless over everything, over other people, our boss, people, personalities, roommates, people that we just run into, people that we have to work with. So in my life, I have to go to step 3 a lot. And I have to be reminded. That's why it's important for me to stay in the recovery community and to be reminded. Sometimes I've had to hit a brick wall. I'd like to say I don't even realize that I'm not fully surrendered. I don't even sometimes realize I'm holding on to a problem until I hit a brick wall. And now that I'm getting older, I feel like every year that I stay sober and that I grow. Like back before recovery, I never grew. I was the same, I was just probably getting worse, as I said. So, but what happened is, now that I have a basis and I have a program, I grow every year. And that's important, a good thing to look at in your own recovery, because I was taught, now I qualify for many programs. I ended up going to AA. So I generally talk about my story as it relates to alcoholism, because that's just how I've shared, but I've done many other things as I shared. But anyway, I'm that quick, I lost my train of thought. Oh gosh, let's see if it comes back. I don't know if it's going to come back. But anyway, if it comes back, I'll say it. If not, I wasn't meant to say it, and I'll go ahead and move on. But anyway, so that surrender is huge. Oh, I usually hit a brick wall. And it's not until I realize that I am, I don't know, I'm just thinking back on how many times I thought I was walking in God's will, and here I wasn't. I was walking in my own will. So as you grow, it becomes easier to discern. So when I think about my early recovery, and it's a process, and we don't have to be perfect. The point is that we are growing. So we want to look at, we're either heading towards a drink or away from a drink. And I'll give you an example. So as I continue to grow towards Christ and I stayed sober, I stopped cursing. I also stopped smoking. All these other things that I've given up, in addition, because I try to become a better person as I walk this road of recovery. And it was being convicted. God convicted me of things in my heart. I didn't have, my sponsor wasn't telling me you have to quit smoking, you have to do this. This was my daily relationship with God that he pointed out to me changes that I needed to make. Now, I always like to say, if you see me outside cursing and smoking a cigarette, I'm probably really close to a drink. So someone tapped me on the shoulder. That means I'm going backwards. So I like to say, that's how you want to look at your behaviors, because you usually pick up a drink before you pick up a drink or a drug. You got to look at your behaviors. How are you acting out? Are you going back? Or are you going forward? So when you take a look and you do your daily, I do it daily. I look at my life, and am I growing? Am I changed? And if not, I need to take a look and see what's going on. So just be on the lookout for that. Look at your behaviors. Now, the other thing that I have noticed, and I've also witnessed, and sometimes this can be even the saddest, and those people that can't fully surrender, which I have sponsored, and it's hard and it's sad, they've ultimately have went out and picked up a drink. And they had faith in God. They just couldn't surrender. They just couldn't give it up. And I've sponsored so many people that love God and they just can't surrender. But the other one is I've seen a lot of people that do surrender and they do get it. And they build a nice life for themselves, and they get years of recovery in them. But then they stop doing what they were doing. And foundational God absolutely has to be the most important part of your life. God has to come first. Your personal relationship, the time that you're spending with God, that's where we draw strength. So if you're struggling with something, you can't do it on your own accord. If you need help with something, it's really about getting closer with God. Taking that quiet time with him. And that's where we draw our strength, from walking in the Spirit. So, let's see. I was thinking about my nephew and how I would always ask him. My nephew, that's one of my biggest rewards. My nephew has been coming to church with me since I've been coming. He was 1 year old when I got sober. And he's now 20 years old and he still goes to church with me. And it's just been one of my biggest blessings. But what we would do is I would pick him up from church and I would always ask him, what did you learn about in church today? And he's like, either God or Jesus. What did you learn about? God or Jesus? And both those answers are right. And that's actually whatever you're going through, God, Jesus is the answer. God is the answer, and seeking him. You want to reach out to other people, your Christian family, people that you have to be careful on who you go to. But God is always the answer. And keeping him first no matter what. I've seen people get jobs and they start to be successful, and then the job becomes more important than God and their relationship with God, and you're going to lose it. Whatever you put in front of God or your recovery, you're going to lose, plus your recovery. So for me, God and the Bible have become what I run to now. And like when you're initially just starting out, training yourself to run to the word, to the right things, it's hard work. And I told you, I had a sponsor that just kept pounding in me, start your day with God. Start your day with God. And it's that discipline that I've carried, and I still start my day with God. I still start my day with God. And what happened is, the longer I stayed sober and the more I did it, this became what I wanted to go to. You know, now I've been talking to some people and trying to encourage them to read the word, and they're like, I don't like to read. Listen to it. Then there's too many audibles now. If you're really struggling with the reading, listen to it. I have the YouVersion Bible app on my phone. It's free. K-Love radio station. I don't even know if people are listening to radio stations, 106.9, but just get the word in you. Podcasts. I remember like when I first like came to know Christ, I couldn't get enough of it. It's like I became addicted to the word, and I was just listening to nothing but Christian radio. Like, we need to renew our mind, and that's where we get the strength. So if we're trying to do something, and you know, we're taught about our character defects, we can't change them on our own. Like we talked about how we're powerless, but it doesn't mean that we can't do anything. We need to focus on our relationship with God. So I went out of order, and I didn't even say everything that I had down on here, but there are a couple of scriptures that I did want to go over. Jesus Christ is our rock and our foundation. So when we can admit, we talked last week that we are powerless, when we can finally admit that we have a problem, that is our foundation. But coming into relationship with Jesus Christ and nourishing that relationship, that is like pouring the concrete on our foundation. It is foundation, and it's what we need to be able to go through the rest of the steps fully, to be able to look at ourselves completely, and then to admit the wrongs that we have done, and then to make those amends and clear the wreckage of our past. We need that strong relationship with Christ. But anyway, two scriptures that were placed on my heart is Matthew 7:24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against the house. Yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock, and Jesus Christ is our rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a crash. So we need to have that firm foundation to get through life. I mean, life is hard. Life is very hard. And, you know, just because we enter recovery and we start doing the right thing doesn't mean that things are not going to happen. They're going to happen. But with God, we can get through them. With lessons, we can get through them and come out refined like gold, is really what happens. Anytime I go through a trial, God is refining me. Whereas before that, I don't even know. I never got through trials. I drank my way through them. But now the other scripture I wanted to go over is Psalm 18, 2. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, my deliverer. My God is my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. There's so many other scriptures that I could have gone over. These are just two that I picked. But something happened in my heart when I entered the recovery process. My relationship with God started forced. It was kind of, you got to get on your knees. I got on my knees and I prayed when I didn't know that I believed. But something happened. As I did what I was taught by my sponsor and I kept getting around people, all of a sudden it's what I wanted. And God became the most important part of my life. And it's still, like, at the end of the day, sometimes just to go, oh, God, thank you. And just knowing that God is with you wherever you are, whatever you're going through, all you have to do is call his name Jesus. There's so much power in the name of Jesus. And it's just my hope for everyone who hears this message that enters recovery to stay. And we can, because there's nothing in our addiction. There's nothing but pain. There's nothing but grief. I don't know. It lies. It's a lie. It lies to us. It tells us that we're having fun. It tells us, but if you're in a moment of clarity and you are looking at your addiction with clear eyes, there was nothing fun about it. I was doing nothing in my life that was productive. Absolutely nothing that was productive. And I didn't know what the purpose of life was. And then today, and I've learned how to have joy. Oh gosh, I'm going to wrap this up. But I just want to encourage you. It's not easy when you're new and you're training and you're starting that relationship with God. But I just want to encourage you to hold on and just put everything that you got into your relationship with God. And I guarantee you the return on investment. I'm going into business for myself, so I'm all about return on investment. The time that you devote on your relationship with God I can't even tell you. I don't even have the word. I know what I'm trying to say, but the word won't come on my tongue. But will compound itself, and you'll just be amazed. And that's all I have for tonight. One other thing, I do want to, if anyone wants one of these, being in early recovery, even if you're not in early recovery, this was given to me when I had 10 years sober, or even I was past 10 years sober, because I was struggling between God's voice and Satan's voice. And sometimes it can be hard to discern the two. And I had someone give me this chart, and it says God's voice calms, comforts, convicts, encourages, enlightens, leads, reassures, and stills. Satan's voice obsesses, worries, condemns, discourages, confuses, pushes, frightens, and rushes us. Because we are in a spiritual battle. And having this chart, I kept it on my nightstand just to look at it. I knew if I was worrying, that's of Satan. If I was being convicted, that was of God. So having this chart, I'll leave these here if anyone wants to take one. And we'll close the meeting.